The European Union says it's working closely with the US president to strike a deal over trade in the next few days. The European Commission chief reporting a good conversation with the American leader. But Ursula von der Leyen standing firm on national interests, with the European Union prepared, as she says, for all scenarios.
I had a good exchange with President Trump earlier this week to help move things forward. We're looking for a reliable framework from which we can keep building our common trade. So the message is clear. We stick to our principles, we defend our interests, we continue the work in good faith, and we get ready for all scenarios.
The European Commission, which negotiates on behalf of all 27 nations in the European Union, says a finalized deal is within its grasp, but challenges in obtaining immediate relief on tariffs and securing a promise from Washington not to introduce any new measures, bringing talks to a standstill. While none of the member nations received Mr. Trump's letters, the European Union still faces sectoral levies from the US, including new ones that have been threatened, as we mentioned, on copper. The bloc has called the move unacceptable, citing profound impacts on its industrial ambitions. And for more on Mr. Trump's latest announcements on tariffs, Tony Waterman joins us live from Washington, D.C. Tony, not just sectoral tariffs, Mr. Trump hinting that at least 7 countries will get their letters on what rates on tariffs they can expect if they do not reach a deal with Washington by the 1st of August. Any suggestions on what we might be expecting?
Well, you're right. The president posted on social media that he plans to send out at least 7 letters this morning, and then an additional undisclosed set of letters will be going out this afternoon. He has given no indication which countries are going to receive those letters, but if they're like the ones that the president has already sent out, those 14 that he posted on his social media site, they will inform these trade partners to the U.S. what their tariff rate is going to be. So far, we have seen that they have ranged from about 25% to 40%, although there is an explicit clause in there saying that it would be a higher rate for anything that is trans-shipped, so items originating in another country, but then passing through those countries to reach the United States in an attempt to avoid U.S. tariffs. And the president says that these tariff rates are going to take effect on August 1st. He made it very clear on Tuesday that there would be no extensions granted, even though just the night before he had said it was not a 100% firm deadline. And that start date, we know, has already been pushed back. It was meant to be today, July 9th. And this is part of the reason why negotiating these deals has been so difficult, because the timeline keeps changing and these countries aren't sure whether or not these tariffs are actually going to take effect. Another thing that we may see in some of these letters is this 10% levy for countries aligned with BRICS, including Brazil, Russia, India, and China. Whether that's an additional levy or a flat levy, we'll have to see. But these letters certainly a sign of frustration from the president.
All right, Tony, this will be targeting individual countries, so bilateral trade, but also movements from the Trump administration on sectors, specifically copper and possibly pharmaceuticals. How does this shift? What does it mean for key sectors in the U.S. and for American consumers?
Well, the president announced a 50% levy on copper that will take effect on August 1st. This is something that he had been threatening since February. So in the short term, we're expecting there to be no shortages because copper importers have been stockpiling the metal in anticipation of this. But of course, that stockpiling and now the tariff announcement has caused the price of copper to spike. It hit a record high. So that is going to drive up the cost of making weapons, electric vehicles, housing costs in the United States. And copper buyers are warning that the levy could really hurt U.S. companies and potentially undermine Donald Trump's dream of reviving American manufacturing. The U.S. does have vast reserves of copper, but ramping up domestic production and refining is going to take a lot of time. On the pharmaceutical side, he is threatening this 200% tariff, just astronomical when you think about it. But this is going to have a bit more lead time. He says that could be implemented in the next year and a half. And we have already seen several large pharmaceuticals take this leap back into the U.S. market, the likes of Eli Lilly, Novartis, committing tens of billions of dollars to expanding their U.S. manufacturing, partly due to this terror threat, but also because of incentives under the Biden administration. The real concern with this 200% tariff is that it could spike the cost of drugs in the U.S. and divert money away from research.
Oh, thanks. Tony Waterman there reporting live from Washington, D.C. As the U.S. president broadens his tariff war, what are the likely implications across Asia and right here in Southeast Asia? Steven Okun, CEO of APAC Advisors, joins us in the studio to answer, or at least try to answer those questions. Now, Mr. Okun, we heard Tony there referring to 9th of July. Now, originally, when we asked you to join us in the studio, it was to answer questions about what happens on the 9th of July, which, if we need reminding, was the date set for either you reach a deal with Mr. Trump, 90 deals in 90 days, or you will face those reciprocal tariffs, which he announced on April 2nd and paused on April 9th. Now you're back, you are here in the studio, facing a slightly different set of questions.
No surprise. Deadlines are not significant to Donald Trump in that they're something that you have to meet. He uses deadlines to spur action. He uses deadlines to get negotiations going, both on the U.S. side and on foreign government side. And then he just delays them when he wants to so that there can be more negotiations and he can have more leverage and he can put more uncertainty into the market and, from his perspective, put more pressure on people. When Donald Trump has a statutory deadline, for example, the Congress said ByteDance must divest from TikTok if you want to keep TikTok in the U.S. Donald Trump ignored that statutory deadline. No surprise, he ignores deadlines that he has made up that have no basis in law.
Even so, if we take a look at the tariffs he announced on the 2nd of April, you can see there on your right, that's just a sample. So major economies that were targeted in that first announcement. If you say it's just a negotiation tactic, even so, if we look at who got what on that chart, that suggests a pattern in the mind of Mr. Trump.
Yeah, that pattern is very easy. Believe Donald Trump when he says he measures the relationship between the U.S. and a country on whether and how large the trade imbalance is. The larger the trade imbalance, the higher the tariff he is going to put on that country because he believes in reciprocity. He believes that having these high tariffs is going to benefit the U.S. economy, U.S. consumer. Most economists, of course, do not agree with him, but that's what he believes. And so those numbers were pretty easy to see when he issued them, where they came from, and the numbers have not shifted much. The problem is that when you are negotiating a trade deal, the point is to have certainty. You need to know when you're negotiating the deal, when you see those 46% tariffs, for Vietnam, or 34 for China, or 10 for Singapore. You know that is going to stick, and if it gets lowered, that lower number will stick. The problem is, while we have all of these reciprocal tariffs that are being issued because of trade imbalances, we also have sectoral tariffs being considered on the basis of national security, and copper and pharmaceuticals are in the news today. There's another 7 sectors. So countries are saying, you have to negotiate both with me. And Donald Trump is saying, no, we're only going to negotiate the tariffs that are going to address the trade imbalance. And guess what? After you sign that agreement with me, you may get hit with more tariffs. And that's why we haven't seen these 90 deals in 90 days that were promised to us 90 days ago.
So in effect, we're looking at a contradiction in what you want to get. So when Mr. Trump goes into these trade negotiations, or his officials do that for him, he is wanting to achieve what? And you are suggesting these different aims are in contradiction with each other. What might they be?
Well, there's 2 different issues. One is he's got 3 different tariffs moving and he's not negotiating them at the same time. So countries are saying, let's negotiate all 3 at once. Let's negotiate the China transshipment tariffs, the reciprocal tariffs, and the sectoral tariffs all at once. And Donald Trump is saying no. Now, the second the contradiction we have is, what is the purpose of these tariffs? Is the purpose of these tariffs to get countries to lower their tariffs on U.S. goods so that it will bring down the trade imbalance that the U.S. has with those countries? Or is the purpose of the tariffs to drive investment back into the United States, to bring manufacturing into the United States? And if the purpose is to bring manufacturing to the United States, you want to keep the tariffs high because that incentivizes people to come back. If your purpose is to get countries to change their bad behavior so that their trade balance gets equalized, well, then you take those tariffs off. Well, that contradicts your first goal. So it's very difficult to know if you're negotiating with the United States what is their objective. And then it's also very difficult to negotiate because they won't negotiate all the tariffs with you all at once.
All right. But if, and I know nothing, this is hypothetical, if Mr. Trump is focused on one priority over and above everything else, which is to shut China out of key technologies, key supply chains, and putting pressure on countries to align with the United States to do that, are these tariffs? So, for example, we saw tariffs really hitting ASEAN very hard. We can take a look at those figures in just a moment. So the April 2nd tariffs, as well as the 14 countries singled out more recently of that, we take a look there. So that was April 2nd. And then what happened recently this week, of the 14 countries, 6 were from ASEAN. And actually, we have 7, except that 7 has got a deal with the United States. They are feeling acute pain because, on the one hand, they're dependent on China for supply chain issues, investment issues. On the other hand, U.S. is the market they need.
Well, the question is, why is the U.S. putting tariffs on China? Why is the U.S. concerned about China? And that is because for decades, China has engaged with unfair trade practices. They use the power of the government to fund companies to give them an unfair advantage. They use the power of the government to keep foreign competition out. And that is why the U.S. has responded with all of these tariffs on China. Now, the U.S. concern is, if you want to make sure China doesn't engage in unfair trade practices, you can't let China circumvent the tariffs on China. And what is happening is both legal and illegal transshipments are taking place in Southeast Asia. So you have China investing in Southeast Asia, you have China shipping to Southeast Asia, and that's going to the U.S. And that is what the U.S. is concerned about. And look, this is what India is concerned about. It's why the Indian minister said, when asked, should India do an FTA with ASEAN, he said, no, that would be silly. Why would it be silly? Because ASEAN is China's B team. And so this is not a U.S. issue when it comes to China's unfair trade practices and then skirting the blocks you put in place through tariffs and other investment restrictions. So all of this is also complicating what is happening in ASEAN. But it is easily predictable that we saw heavy tariffs on Southeast Asia, the first ones announced along with Japan, South Korea, and Bangladesh, because of that China, and I got to put in air quotes, transshipment issue, because not all transshipment is illegal. But that is what the United States and other countries are worried about.
All right. A very quick last question, because we have no time. We are looking at a huge, profound adjustment in supply chains and how we commoditize relationships between countries. All the changes when Mr. Trump leaves office? Final question.
Yeah, I mean, the global rules-based trading system that took us about, decades to create, after World War II, that, if it hasn't ended, it is certainly coming to an end. It is not going to take 6 months or a year or 3 years to come up with a new global trading system. This is getting worked out in real time. And what that means is that there is going to be uncertainty. And that uncertainty is going to hit businesses. It's going to hit investment. It's going to hit consumers. It's going to hit government. And this is what we are all working out, which is why I am sure I'm going to be back at some other time, because there's a long way to go and to try and figure out what's going to happen globally with trade.
And not just another time. We have not even got through a fraction of the questions we needed to ask today. Thanks so much for coming in, Mr. Steve Okun, CEO of APAC Advisors.